Welcome to Rappler Talk. I'm Ezra Faraz. Joining me today is Richard DeCalos, the co-founder and creator of Upstart, an RPG board game that tries to teach players how to set up their own business. Thank you for joining us today, Richard.
Thank you for having me.
So where did you get this idea to start a board game that tries to teach people about business and entrepreneurship?
Well, this has been about a year and a half in the making. About a year and a half ago, a lot of different things were happening. I think one thing that was a major influence is a friend invited me to a game of Cash Flow 101 by Kiyosaki, or more famously, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I played the game and it was great. I got to experience what it's like to manage my money. I learned a lot doing that, also with wealth generation. But one of my major comments was that it didn't seem very realistic how you set up a business. You could spend money and all of a sudden, here's an automated business. As a startup founder myself, I was like, okay, that seems a little bit unrealistic. It's a lot more grit, takes a lot more grit. So what if we could create something that actually teaches people the grit, that teaches people how to set up a business and experiencing both the success and, more importantly, the failure? Because a lot of people tell you you learn more from the failure. So it gives you that experience all without the risk because it's a board game. And that was one of the major influences. I'm a gamer myself, so I thought gaming is a great way to learn.
In terms of risk aversion, do you feel that's one of the biggest problems standing in the way of the Philippines producing more entrepreneurs? And that's why you made Upstart?
Yeah, risk aversion is a major factor. You know, Southeast Asia, it's a very risk-averse culture here in the Philippines. I think it's the way we were brought up, try to avoid failure as much as possible. I think it's a big barrier, and one of the things about Upstart is that it gives you that ability to take that risk without actually taking the risk. So you get to play it in a board game where when you lose an investor in the game, you actually don't lose it in real life. When you lose your business, you don't have to go cry it out so much anymore. You can just kind of wipe it off your shoulder and say, okay, this is it. It was just a game.
So how does the game try to simulate real-life experiences as an entrepreneur without the risk?
So it works essentially like any typical role-playing game. You get to choose your background, and I think that's one of the more interesting things that you can do with the game. It really goes to your personal background. So you choose something that's close to your situation. So we have one, for example, that's full-time employee. So a lot of people, they want to try it out. Like, I have my own full-time job. How do I set up a business at the same time? So the advantage in the game is if you're a full-time employee, you have steady income. But the challenge is that you have less time to use. On the other hand, you can choose to be a full-time entrepreneur. You have more time, actually a lot of time, but you have no steady income. So you work with that background and you spend every turn rolling for chance. You can get life cards, breakdown cards, opportunity cards, which we call the break cards, where you might be able to get investors for certain amounts of equity. And then you spend every turn putting things in, taking fate into your own hands by spending the two currencies, which is time and money. And that's one of the very interesting things. You get to see how you would run a business based on your current situation.
So what do you say are the advantages of simulating experiences as an entrepreneur versus actually just going out and becoming an entrepreneur and starting your own business?
Well, you know, most successful entrepreneurs, the advice they'll give you is just do it. The mantra nowadays is fail fast and learn from your mistakes. But again, if you're in a risk-averse culture, you know, it's not an easy thing to ask of someone. So the great thing about doing it through the board game or doing it through Upstart is, like I mentioned, you lose an investor in the game, you don't lose one in real life. You can fall flat on your face and have the worst failures in the game, but you can, again, rub it off your shoulder. Just say, it was just a game. And you get to do all of that in your own home or out with your friends in a co-working space.
What has been the early response to Upstart so far? What kinds of lessons are these players learning about entrepreneurship and about business?
And one of the interesting things of how it's designed is it doesn't just teach you the skills, because you know, you can go to school, you can go on the internet to learn about business plans, about marketing plans. What it really does is it shows you the experience, and more importantly, the blind spots, the things that you don't usually notice, the things that are in the background that we bring to the foreground. Take, for example, some of the players, when they've played, they realize, hey, I actually do everything myself. I don't get team members. So they get to realize that and take it to the real world and say, okay, maybe I need to start looking for my co-founders. Or some people, what they realize is, hey, wait, I'm not taking care of my health because there's a vitality stat. And then what happens, they get sick, they lose 2 or 3 turns, then all of a sudden, oh wait, I need to take care of myself. And that's what people take away. They get to see what are the habits that are both healthy and unhealthy and both productive and unproductive. And that's what they can take into the real world.
So have some of the upstart players actually applied the lessons they've learned from the game to real life businesses or startups?
Yeah, like I mentioned, we've been testing this for about 1.5 years. We've worked with people as young as high school students, all the way up to people who are up in the corporate ladder already, also with people all around the world. And one of the things they get is lifelong lessons. That's been showing up a lot in the testimonials. One person, they actually said, okay, it turns out I don't manage my time. And because the currency is time and money, they start saying, okay, I don't actually look at how many hours I spend on a certain task. And you see them tinkering already with their Google Calendar because they never had a calendar before. Or you have people who are in the corporate world who are full-time employees, and they start seeing, hey, wait, yeah, I can start a business. I do have some time to manage it. Maybe it's going to be difficult, but I can transition. Then I can maybe switch to part-time and transition out. It doesn't have to be this huge, giant leap of faith jumping off a cliff to build a startup. So the players actually get to learn that way.
In terms of getting the word out to potential players of Upstart, I understand you're going the crowdfunding route now via the Spark project. Can you tell us a little bit more about why you decided to choose that route?
Yeah, well, we went crowdfunding. If you look at our campaign, we're going to be doing it from August 19 all the way up to September 19. And if you look at our targets, only around 300,000 pesos. In a traditional sense, it actually isn't that much capital needed to get the first mass production out. We could have went straight to stores, but I mentioned cash flow 101. One of the things that made it very successful in the late 90s and early 2000s is they had a community. And if you ask anyone who does crowdfunding, it's not about the money. It's about building a community, building the people who will really support your project. And that's what we really believe in. We believe in community. So we could have went to stores. We would have had no idea who the buyers are. We would have had no idea what they want, what they like. But now we're doing a crowdfunding campaign. We know each of the backers individually. We talk with them. We talk about their dreams, their aspirations, and we work together. And the community is a big part. So for us, the crowdfunding is a way to connect and build the first Upstart ambassadors.
So if you're able to get a lot of Upstart ambassadors through your crowdfunding campaign and they're able to promote the board game across the Philippines, what effect do you want to have on the country?
Well, for me, I don't just see this as a board game. It really is an educational tool. Like, imagine if you can go to a high school, then you see high school students in their 2nd or 3rd year. They're learning about business and they're learning in a fun atmosphere, and their parents don't have to worry about them failing because parents are going to do that no matter what. And they can really learn. Or in a college classroom where you don't just have to learn case studies. It could be a supplement. You can actually get the experience of setting up the business without the risk. And we're talking about the startup ecosystem. A lot of people say we're on the cusp of a golden age of entrepreneurship, that the Philippines might be the next Silicon Valley. And there's a lot of factors that are supporting the ecosystem. We believe that the board game could be one way to nurture this culture of entrepreneurship, help again by building this community. Take, for example, our Upstart ambassadors. If you get the 5,000 peso tier of our crowdfunding, you get a board, and then you can even hold your own Upstart nights. You can charge them like 500 pesos per head. If you have 5 people there, after 2 Upstart nights, you actually have earned back. So even by becoming a backer, you become an entrepreneur. And that's what we want to do, help build more entrepreneurs.
So what advice do you have for the aspiring entrepreneurs out there, either based on the game, playing the game, or your own experiences in trying to scale the game as a startup?
I think, I mentioned it was 1.5 years in the making. We did a lot of testing. So it's really knowing your customer. We spent a lot of time talking to people, having people interact with our product. So if that was the advice, aside from just do it and fail fast, I'd say know your customer. And now you don't just have the option of just doing it. You have the option now of playing Upstart to see what it's like to set up your own business.
Thank you for joining us today, Richard. We've been speaking with Richard DeCalos, the co-founder and creator of Upstart, an RPG board game that tries to teach people how to set up their own business. I'm Ezra Faraz, and thank you for joining Rappler Talk.